Try it again. Hey, that's right. All right. It worked. Good morning, everybody. I hope everybody had a good week. I had an awesome week myself. I do have a couple of announcements that I need to make. I'm going to turn things over to Cindy for one of them. But let me start with the first announcement. We had a request that our class help with the Family Life Center. If anybody in here would be willing to volunteer. I've already volunteered myself. I hope I'm not the only one, because that's going to be pretty sad if I'm the only one doing it. But volunteer helping over at the Family Life Center to kind of clean it up, put down some mulch, that kind of stuff. So like I said, I've already volunteered myself. I'm hoping people will join me in that effort. We haven't set a date yet, but what I wanted to do is just kind of get some idea of some people that might be willing to help. I'm going to set up like a sign-up sheet for it. So after class, if you're willing to help me with that, that'd be great. Come and sign up. All the help I can get, I appreciate it, because obviously me by myself, it's going to take forever. So I'd appreciate anybody that can help with that. And the second announcement, I wanted to turn the floor over to Miss Cindy for that announcement.
Yes, sir. Just letting the class know, with the passing of Jerry, Sandy, she'll be coming back probably a couple more weeks. She was in service. She's going to continue that. But anyway, we're going to just take up a love offering for her. Okay, and I'm going to carry it on out through the end of the month. And I know there's a couple of certain little needs,
yes,
but they have prepared for this for a couple of years, with their financial, which is awesome. But they're going to sell this truck, so if anybody wants to talk to her about that, I think it's a later model truck, if anybody's ever seen that. But it had a rebuilt engine put in it, maybe a year and a half, something like that. And she's going to apply that towards her car payment. I don't know what she's got left or anything, but
right.
I always run stuff like this through the pastor, guys. I just always want you to know that. He knows a lot more what's going on in homes and things like that than I do. So, but anyway, and just under his guidance and all of that too. So. I think that'd be a good need for her to whatever.
Sure.
So just want to let you guys know that.
And just to add to that,
we'll just, even if it goes into July sometime, we're just going to kind of just play with it.
right. And just to add to that, I talked to her, of course, at the service, and she had mentioned that it kind of came in droves, all the different things happening, and that's sometimes the way it does in life, right? We all know that. We've all been there. And she said that a few days after he passed, her air conditioner went out, and a couple other appliances in her home, major appliances, went out, and her family's trying to help her with that, because that's obviously with all of everything already going on. Satan wanted to throw a few extra little loopholes in her life just to try and pull her as far away from God as she could. But she's in good spirits, and she knows the Lord's with her. She knows that she'll get through it.
Stepped up with her.
Yeah.
Which is great. Her son had come from Maryland. He's here, and that, has been a strain with her children from way back. And but anyway, she loves the Lord and trusts in Him. But and of course, y'all know she works. Cummins. She's got a really important position there at Cummins. She's quality control, and she's up in that age, but she's going to stay with it and what she needs to. But anyway, just letting you guys just know a little bit of what's what.
So if any of you can help, certainly as well, it'd be great. All right, so let's begin with our class today. Who'd like to start us off with? Let me shut off this talking part here, and then because it's kind of repeating my words underneath, and then we will start off with prayer, and we'll begin with the lesson. Yep, thank you, Jim.
Heavenly Father, we thank you for this day. We thank you for this beautiful Sunday. We thank you for everybody taking the time to come and meet together, so we listen to Charles' word. We ask that you use him to be a beacon to shine your word and your light on all of us, so that way we can plant the seeds and we leave here. Lord, I pray that you are with Sandy as she's going through these trials and tribulations. We know that you have a plan, and we know that Satan is doing everything he can to pull her, but her faith in you is stronger. So Lord, we ask that you are with her and you keep her close and protected. So once again, we thank you for today, and we pray this in your name. Amen.
Amen. One other thing, I'm going to be doing children's church after this for my second time, so pray for me for that as well. I think I'm prepared, but it's kids, so you never know. All right, so I've got a few jokes I think are pretty funny, so hopefully you guys enjoy them as well. A proud businessman, he was driving his new luxury car down a rural road, and was very proud of this car, very happy that he had bought it and all that. And he accidentally drove the car into a ditch. Fortunately, there happened to be just a simple farmer there nearby with his big, strong horse that named Buddy. And the businessman asked for help, and the farmer agreed to help him pull out the car with his horse Buddy. So the farmer hitched Buddy up to the car and shouted, "Pull! Pull, Nellie, pull!" Buddy didn't budge, didn't move, right? And then the farmer shouted, "Pull, Buster, pull!" Again, the horse didn't move. Once more, the farmer yelled, "Pull, Coco, pull!" Of course, Buddy just stood there. And finally, the farmer yelled, "Pull, Buddy, pull!" And Buddy pulled that car out like it was nothing. Well, the businessman, he was grateful, and a little curious of all that, right, what he had just seen happen. So he said to the farmer, he said, "Listen, I heard you call out so many different names other than the horse's actual name, Buddy. What's that all about?" And the farmer smiled and replied, "Oh, Buddy's blind. So if he thought he was the only one pulling, he wouldn't do any of it." All right. A man told his boss that he was called to be a preacher, that he had to resign from his position, that the Lord had called him to service. However, he was back asking for his job back in 2 weeks. And his boss said, "Look, I'd love to have you back. You're a great employee, but I thought you said you were called by God to preach and preach His word." And he said, "Yeah, but that was before he heard me preach." All right. So, didn't like that one. All right. Those are those jokes that people that are learning to be a pastor, we think, yeah, that's me. I wonder if the Lord appreciates my preaching or not. All right, so today we're going to continue on our lesson with Proverbs 11:2 and 13:10. And really the theme, effectively, of what we're going to be discussing is the wisdom of humility, pride, right? And as we all know, pride is one of those sins in the Bible that is treated with it's talked about a lot, because it is one of the easiest sins that we as people fall into. And also happens to be one of those sins that most of the greats in the Bible, they succumbed to, and found that they were unfortunately just as susceptible to that sin as we all are. So these lessons actually that we're going to talk about today come from these Proverbs, and I've got several more also that support this, but we're going to start with these two and kind of just get an understanding of the message behind the Proverbs. But to do that, I think we first have to get a better understanding of pride itself. Answers to questions like, what is pride? What are the different types of pride? What does it seem, or why does it seem, I should say, that that's his most preferred sin, right, to try and tempt us into. And once we understand the nature of pride in our lesson, then I think we can look at why pride is such a dangerous thing for us as Christians. And what does sinful pride lead to ultimately? And finally, is there a positive form or a righteous form of pride? So let's start with, helps if I don't zoom and I turn the page. All right, so who'd like to read for me Proverbs 11:2 to begin, and then we will talk about it. Yes, thank you.
When pride comes, then comes disgrace, but with the humble is wisdom.
Excellent, thank you. So the writer of Proverbs tells us that pride leads to disgrace, and this is because pride kind of blinds us to our weaknesses, causes us to overestimate, if you will, our own abilities. And when we fail, as all of us do, right? All of us are going to fail at some point in our lives. we face, in many cases, Satan will want us to face or believe we face humiliation because of that failure due to pride. And kind of a good story, a good biblical story of this is King Nebuchadnezzar in Daniel 4:28 through 37. Now, we're not going to read it. I'm going to put it on the screen because it's quite long. But basically, the basics of the story are that Nebuchadnezzar obviously was the greatest king at the time, right? And ruled over a huge kingdom and conquered many other nations. And he became so prideful that he believed he was a god, effectively, and was not giving God the right, righteousness or the right awe that he should, right? He believed that God was the reason behind his power and the reason behind his success. And so ultimately, God took away his sanity and his kingdom. He made him to where he was like an animal, acted like an animal, didn't talk, he barked probably, right? It kind of leads you to believe he acted like a dog. And ultimately, until Nebuchadnezzar acknowledged God's sovereignty, he ate grass and wallowed around and acted crazy, right? So ultimately, the story kind of shows us that, this guy that believed he had everything, was in control of everything, the most powerful man he could be, he was still, had to believe and understand that God was truly the one in control. And that his power came only by the grace and will of God, rather than his own. And of course, we all know the other part of that story with Nebuchadnezzar, where he throws Daniel's friends, I should say, into the fire, and the Lord saves them. And that again was once again because they would not bow down to an idol that Nebuchadnezzar had erected. He wanted people to worship that idol. Every time music played, you were to bow down to this idol. And they refused because they had one God, our God. And they said, we're not going to do that. And so once again, because Nebuchadnezzar felt like he had the power of God, he told them, well, if you're not going to worship who I tell you to worship, I'm going to throw you in the fire. So once again, he had to be taught and understand that he was not truly ultimately as powerful as he believed he was, right? His pride clouded the truth. He believed he was more than he truly was. And unfortunately, pride does that to all of us, right? It clouds our judgment, makes us believe things that are not true. Many times we inflate our own self in it. And pride can come in many different forms. So let's kind of talk about that a little bit, the different types of pride. There's several, as you can see on the screen here. And pride puts really a lot of different appearances on you, right? It can lead you in many different ways, right? And the first one here, pride of station, is basically authority. It's Nebuchadnezzar, what we just talked about, right? His place where he was, his station, he was king. And so his pride of station led him to believe he was more powerful than he was. And rather than understand he was placed there by God, at God's will, he believed it was all him, right? And it's very easy when you're, especially in that kind of situation, and you don't have to be king to have pride of station or authority. You could be the boss at your work, right? And because you feel you are powerful and you feel that power of station, it can lead you to sins very easily, right? Because again, you start to discount God's hand in your life. And ultimately, that leads to other sins as well. But being in authority, a lot of times, right, you get in this chamber where people want to please you. And so obviously they're going to tell you things that they think you want to hear, which only further feeds that pride that Satan then uses to hurt you, right? Pride can be a good thing, but many times it leads to not being a good thing because we inflate it more than it should be. Pride, we'll talk about at the end there, the correct kind of pride that we should have. There is such a thing as good pride, but it's very limited in scope and where it should lead you. So the first one is authority and station, right? So a lot of times people will believe they're greater than they are when they're in that scenario because, again, many people tell them that, right? So what do the scriptures say to that, right? Well, they say that man will not long abide in honor, seeing he may be compared to the beast that perisheth. In other words, we're just like any other animal under the power of God. And we perish just like any other creature under the power of God. And so we are only as powerful as the one that truly holds the power of life and death as he makes us, right? And so it's folly to believe that you are more powerful than you are. And I know we've talked several times about what folly is, but it also says men of high degree are a lie. To be laid in the balance, they are altogether lighter than vanity. So again, in other words, when you hold yourself in such high esteem, when you look at the truth of it, laid in the balance, right? When you look at the truth of it, it's all vanity. You're being vain is truly where your pride is coming from. You're not, you don't deserve that pride that you give yourself effectively, right? So the next one on the list here is pride of birth. And it's not that much different than the pride of station, right? And in ancient times, right, even then, many people saw how absurd it was that people that were born into riches or born into a house of glory or whatever you want to call it, right? They realized, hey, they're no different than me. Just because they were born to that family doesn't make them better than me. And yet, many times, because of the way that the culture was back then, your name meant a lot, right? And so they would place a lot of importance on your name that ultimately led to pride, led to the negative kind of pride, which again, Satan used. He used back then, he's still using now. And so even today, right, you can't control what family you're born to, right? You didn't have any control over that. And yet many times we will use that, wherever we were born, if we were born into an affluent family versus a poor family, many times we will allow that to put pride in our heart and make us believe we are different than the others around us, right? All of us in here are equal to every other person that's homeless outside. The only difference between you and them is the house you live in. Bottom line, we're all still the same. We all still believe the same things. We have the same heart. We all are still under the same power of God. And yet many times we will, I heard a story, and I told it to somebody last week, of a pastor that came into a church. He was supposed to be starting as the new pastor, and they were changing over, right? And it was a denomination that they assigned pastors, right? And they didn't say what denomination, I think, to keep from shaming the denomination. But this pastor came in, and for the first week, he sat in the back of the church, and he was wearing just, dirty clothes, right? Effectively, he was coming in as somebody that was poor, as somebody that was homeless, perhaps. Nobody asked him, nobody talked to him for the whole week. People gave him dirty looks, if he got any looks at all. And then at the end of that week, when they announced, today the pastor's coming to speak, he came up to the pulpit and he said, I've known you all week. Nobody's talked to me. I hope that this is not how you guys treat everybody in this situation. Your pride has clouded you to believe that you're better than me. And you don't know me because you didn't get to know me. You didn't even try to get to know me. And of course, many of them held their head in shame, as they should have, because they treated him differently simply by the way he looked, right? And I know it's hard to do. We all do it, right? We all have the problem where we look at somebody and we make a snap judgment. And it's very difficult to get into a mindset where you can learn to teach yourself not to do that. Because I think what we all know, even though we have to be taught it many, many times over, is that first look is usually not even close to the truth behind that person, right? And it's not until we truly get to know them that we know them. And so it's something you've got to work on to be good at, right? It's not something that comes natural, because we all have that snap judgment where we look at somebody and we decide what we believe based upon that first impression. And it can be very hard to teach yourself not to, right? But it's something we should strive to do, to always be teaching ourselves. Don't judge the book by its cover. Judge it by the interior of the book, right? I can tell you there's so many times in my life where I went to job interviews and they basically wrote me off. Yeah, and I had to prove that I could do the job before they even would interview me. And then usually, give you one example, I had broken my leg and shattered my femur in 7 pieces, and I came from Ohio That was when I was vice president of a credit card processing company. And I basically lost my job and had to come home to Dad. Dad, I'm bringing a wife and a daughter. Hope that's okay. Yeah, son, anytime, But so I come home and I couldn't walk for about a year. And then finally I started in a chair, but I needed a job, right? I got a wife, I got a daughter, I'm living in Daddy's house. That's not good, right? And just like any of you, I don't want my daughter and wife to not have what they need. And so I went and looked for a car, job selling cars. And they looked at me in the wheelchair and they went, so you're going to sell cars? How are you going to test drive? I'm not. What do you mean you're not? They're going to drive, and when they come back, I've already sold them. So by the time they get in the car, they're going to want the car anyway. I'm going to sell them before they ever take the test drive. And anyway, long story short, I told them, I said, look, if you give me the job, I promise you that I'll be your top salesman in a month. And if I'm not, fire me. I'll walk away. And they said, sure, you're going to be that confident? Go for it. And I was for the next 3 months. I was the top salesman in the building. And they gave me the office for the top salesman and all that. But the point is people judged me by the cover. They judged me by looking at my body, my physical capability, right? And they made a snap decision of what I could or couldn't do. And unfortunately, it's what we all do, right? So I don't fault them. I understand where it comes from, and I do it too, right? Maybe not to that extent or in those circumstances, but we all do it. And it's a habit that we each have, that we have to work to not have. So it's good that we work at it, right? We always should. And pride of birth, don't let where you were born, how you were born, the fact that you were born with or without money affect how you treat others. Next is kind of in line with that, pride of riches, right? And pride of riches is basically just, money, obviously. The fact that you have money, whether you were born into it or not. The fact that maybe you earned it, right? Perhaps you won the lottery, whatever, right? However you acquired that money, many times that can lead to pride, where once again you fall into the trap that sin, or Satan, I should say, leads you to believe that somehow because of that money that makes you better than others, right? Or different than others. And once again, it doesn't. And quite frankly, that one is one of the easiest ones to get trapped in, right? Because of our world today, the way it works and with the material nature of our world, that is very hard because it's very easy to fall into that trap, right? Where you've got, it's old keeping up with the Joneses, right? We all want to, we want to feel like we are doing as well as the next person to us, right? And so we will strive to do that. And many times when we strive to have that money so that we can keep up with the Joneses, we end up falling into sin in order to accomplish that. And that's why it's very dangerous that form of pride. Next one is pride of talent, right? And look, some people have the greatest of talents, right? And they should use them, but they should use them for God, right? Not for their own gain. And that's why God gave them that talent, was for them to use it in some way to exalt God. And many times you'll see people that have talents they waste, right? They waste for either money or whatever, and they don't use those talents for the Lord. And unfortunately, that also leads to pride, where they believe then they are better. I always used to teach my daughter, she's very smart, but I always used to teach her, look, irregardless of how smart you are, that doesn't give you the license to be mean to somebody that's not, or to use your smartness to harm someone that isn't, right? That's wrong. Don't do it, right? And it's the same kind of thought here. It's a talent that God had given her, right? And I wanted to ensure in her that she would not use that in a negative way and hurt others in the process, because many do. Even that talent of just being smart can lead to you sinning against others quite greatly. Next one is pride of judgment, right? And pride of judgment is often young people, right? Where they're kind of foolish. They believe they know everything. They don't, but they believe they do. Simply because they lack the judgment to know the difference, right? And so pride of judgment can be where you, as whether you're a child or not, but we just see it more often in children, right? where they think they're smarter than they are. That's why many of the Proverbs that we've read where it says don't argue with a fool because he's going to stay a fool, that's where this comes from, the pride of judgment. A fool is going to be a fool many times because they like being a fool. And as much as you want to argue with them about why they're wrong, they're never going to see it because they choose not to because they've got the pride of judgment. They believe they're right, and no matter what you say, you're never going to change their mind that they're wrong. They're right, or wrong. And unfortunately, that's bad because that kind of person's unteachable, right? If you're unteachable, how can God teach you? How can He change you into who you need to be, should be? If you're unwilling to even hear that you might be wrong about something, right? So pride of judgment, and look, there was a time I struggled with this, right? Where I wanted to have the last word in the argument, right? And unfortunately, what that leads to is you don't learn, right? I missed out on so many things by trying to be right or have the last word that I could have learned by just stopping and listening and hearing what the other person was saying, rather than picking it apart to make my point, right? And so pride of judgment can lead you to not hearing God's word, right? Because you believe you already know it. Many times the people that don't believe in God, this is part of why, because they have this pride of judgment. They believe that it's foolishness, right? That we're all crazy, we all don't know what we're talking about, and we're all simpletons. I can tell you right now, some of the smartest people I've met are Christians. Some of the smartest scientists on the planet are Christians. So to believe that just because you believe in God makes you simple is, again, pride of judgment. It's somebody that believes they know something they truly don't, and yet it's hard to convince them. And the last one is spiritual pride. Now, spiritual pride can come in a couple different forms, right? And it can have a good thing, right? Spiritual pride can be a good thing, where you are proud of God, right? You're proud that you're a Christian. You're proud that that your life has changed. Those are good kind of pride, right? But there also can be a negative kind of pride there with spiritual pride, and that is where you then become a judge, right? You start judging others because you believe you're more pious than someone else, or you are following God better than someone else, or your walk is further, whatever. However you want to term it. Many times we can fall into that trap of Satan will use your spiritual pride against you, where he then will cause you to hurt somebody else simply because, hey, I don't sin like that. I'm not that guy or girl, right? The truth is you're no different than they are. You're just further along the path than they are. That doesn't make you better. That makes you further along the path. That just means you've learned more over time. But your duty at that point is not to have that spiritual pride and have that judgmental kind of attitude. Your duty is to help them along, to bring them to where you're at, rather than tamping them down on the head for whatever you're judging them for. Our place is not to judge, as we know. There's only one judge, and we'll all face him, including for the times that we judged others. You'll face the true judge for that. But ultimately, there's all these different kinds of pride, right? And there's probably a few more I'm leaving out, but these are the ones that most scholars agree are the types of pride that we can fall prey to. I know each of us has different experiences, but what are some ways that you've seen pride enter your life, and how has it affected you as a Christian? Anybody want to answer that? Yeah.
Having a new boss come into the job that's younger than you.
Right.
Accepting that, especially knowing that you've been doing the job a lot longer.
Sure.
And they only got it just because of experience.
Right.
No actual work experience. It doesn't matter. Authority is authority.
Sure.
Just like we're taught here.
Sure.
You're supposed to respect and just deal with it. It's not meant to be, it's not meant to be. If it is, then all right.
Right.
So it's just one of those things where you just got to suck it up and go, okay, I'm being selfish.
Sure.
They're not for a reason. It just happened.
Right.
My time.
And it's hard to do sometimes, isn't it?
It is.
Yeah. But the good news is because you have Christ in you, because you have the Holy Spirit in you, you can, right? And many people don't.
Correct. And not only that, too, but they probably get criticized enough, and if you're that one that
Sure.
puts that pride aside,
Sure.
and they can see that, then you'll get more respect from that
Certainly.
person. I literally just had that happen last week. My boss is leaving to run his own business.
Right.
So the guy that is coming to take over, he's 20 years younger than me.
Right.
And, and you can tell he's nervous,
Sure.
but, it's one of those things as I've gotten, grown with my walk and learning, that I've just been like talking to him,
Sure.
getting down to his level
Sure.
and resulting with this.
Well, it's amazing what you can learn when you're willing to listen too, right? So he may have so many things he can teach you, even though you also have many things you can teach him. So, and what you said is very important. God placed him there for a purpose. I don't know what that purpose is. You may learn it, you may not, but God did place him there for a purpose. So, accept God's will and ultimately do what you're doing. That's great. You can learn from him, and as you said, by you trying to be the other person that learns from him and respects his position, respects that God's placed him there, he'll respect you. And in turn, that may open up an avenue. I don't know if he's Christian or not. It may open up an avenue for you to talk to him about being a Christian, right? And that may be the purpose. I don't know, Joe. But certainly keep that in mind. That may be why he's there, is to teach you humility, one, and two, for you to help him see the other side of humility and his place in that, right? So good point, good one. Any others? Yes.
Charles, it's not an answer to your question, but looking at all the different types of pride you've got up there,
Right.
all of those can be used as a platform to promote God,
Certainly.
to brag on Him.
Certainly.
And I think of that young man for the Kansas City Chiefs, that kicker, that wasn't trying to get in anybody else's business. He was just expressing what the Lord has done
Right.
and trying to encourage these young people. And he got there because of the talent.
Right.
And that's why he was asked to speak.
Right.
But he used that platform in a positive way.
Certainly.
And otherwise he wouldn't have had that platform. And it's the same with all of the different ones that are in those categories. God is, regardless of how you got there or whatever.
Right.
Some people say, well, they're a self-made person. There's
No such thing.
self-made people.
No such
All gifts
Yes.
come from God.
Yes.
And the gift of talent shows what that young man was made out of. And then it also reveals those who have talent like he does that criticize and mock God
Right.
in this process.
Right.
They use their platform to promote Satan.
Right.
But those things can be, you can be put in those places just for that reason.
Absolutely. And good point you're making, that each of these things, when a good kind of pride, when it's a good spiritual pride, can be used to exalt God rather than yourself, right? But that takes humility, and we're going to talk about humility in the next slide. Very good point. Very good point. Any other thoughts? Yes. Ken.
I just had one thing that I've noticed for teaching for 30 years.
Mm-hmm.
Parents want to be very proud of their children,
Right.
and they will take the most extreme measures possible to keep that kid from failing.
Right.
Whether it's a test, a quarter, or whatever. And I've told parents, I said, you know what? Allow your child to fail.
Sure.
If you don't allow them to fail as a kid,
Yes.
and then when they grow up and they've never had failure, they will never recover from it.
No.
I mean, never recover from it. And Friday I flew to Washington and flew back because we have death in the family. And my brother went with me, and we had a long talk about pride. And he said, I need to ask you for forgiveness because I have been prideful and arrogant my whole life. And I was like, oh Lord, there was never a more true statement. And my children, that has always been the thing that we've talked about, is Ray knew everything. But in his talk with me, he talked about the 3 versions of humility.
Sure.
And how he has learned to, he's in the process of not being arrogant and not being prideful, And all of those things that you mentioned, I think he may have had the same class you had, buddy.
Right.
Because he talked about all of those, and I had a little bit of preview. So is your thing on humility a three-part thing?
Mine's 2 parts, but, well, kind of 3, yeah.
Okay. It's interesting that he has done that self-awareness of the pride and error, and he's very successful
Right,
in the business world and as a professor.
right,
And he knows he's very good at what he does, and he is.
right.
But he was demonstrating to me that he is very sorry for all the bragging he's
That's good.
done. And he doesn't view it, he didn't view it as bragging, he viewed it as just telling sister how things are going. I'm like,
Sure.
oh, great God,
Sure.
great Bubba.
But that's good that he's found the, like you said, the humility and the ability to self-reflect, right?
Yeah.
It can be very hard to look in that mirror, right? Because sometimes it's scary what you see on the other side, on that reflection, right? And so we tend to put a film over that mirror so we don't see it clearly, right? And many times people in his position, they'll do that for many years, right? Until something wakes them up. So it's good that he woke up. It's good that he's self-reflective. That's excellent. And humility is not a thing that you just get, right? It's something you got to work at, and it's something that you've got to daily bear your cross, as the Bible tells us, right? We can't just expect that, the one day we say, "Oh, I'm sorry for being rude and prideful," that now automatically you're just going to be great, right? No, it's something you got to work at each day, and he'll have to work at each day. And when you recognize the fact that you have these types of pride within you, it makes it easier for you to work on. But it's it's also hard because it's something that's affecting you, perhaps. Very good. Yes.
And like you were saying, you don't come naturally with this. It's not installed in you.
Right.
In the Navy, you had to go to classes in indoctrination when you reached a certain rank because of this kind of stuff. They literally taught us humility.
Right.
Because you're about to take over a position that has lots of power, and you're supervising all these people and stuff, and don't let it go to your head.
Right.
I think somebody in the Navy read this 100 years ago and said, we need to teach a class on it.
Right. Well, and look, the military is good, and some of even my experience from my father being in the military himself, and leadership qualities is what you're talking about, leadership training. And it is very good what they do in the military with the fact, because look, you're absolutely right. Not only is it power that they're receiving, but it's power of life and death. And so they want to be certain that the person wielding that power is not hot-headed, is not, lost up here and, just prideful to the point to where, hey, I can kill anybody I want, right? And unfortunately, there are people like that. So the military tries very hard to root that out and teach against it. So, but yeah. My father, there's 15 leadership qualities, right? I think it is. Am I wrong? But there's 15 leadership qualities that the Army teaches that my father used to try and drill into me when I was young. He was a drill sergeant, so everything was.
I saw what you did.
Everything was a drill, right? But good point. Good point. Any other thoughts before we move on? All right. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
I had a coworker that was given a supervisor position
Mhm.
at work, and they took her into the office and basically told her that she is to stand up and be rude to everybody. Push your friends away that you have on the floor because now you're a supervisor and you can no longer be friends with them. She's been there for 7 years, and she's like, I'm not going to break friendship
Sure.
because you want to give me a position, and she reduced it.
Right.
Because they were basically telling her to just rule the roost and be mean to everybody
Yeah.
because you're a supervisor.
And that's wrong.
It is.
Yeah. And look, it's unnecessary. I can tell you, I got more performance out of people that worked for me by being kind
Yes.
than I ever would by being mean. And I'll tell you, I had people that they were willing to fight, literally fight for me, because of the difference in way I managed, right?
Well,
So
that's
that's,
what she said. She said, I have more respect with them as my
sure,
friends,
sure,
than I do to be a supervisor and treat them as they don't as mix.
Sure.
Because if if I go out on the floor and I'm like, boss, they're not gonna listen to me.
Sure.
It's just like, you know, a child, you go in there and you yell at them and,
Right.
you know, this, that, and the other, they rebel.
They become tone
You know,
deaf.
if you become their friend and, you know, wanna teach them the right way.
Right.
they're more willing to learn.
Right. And look, it's and that particular thing there with work and supervisory positions and all that. Many companies, that's the way they teach to manage, right? Unfortunately, it's not the right way. It's not the way that's most performant, right? And tends to be, you know, unfortunately, it happens a lot. But it's good that your friend said no. I'm not going to be willing to do that, and she stood up for what was right. That's hard to do, right? Because she's being offered more money, she's being offered power. That's hard to do, right? So that's very good, very good. Yes.
So the reason why I had to go through a class specifically for that is because of your bias. If you go from being on the floor and being everybody's friend to being a supervisor, you are going to play favoritism.
Hopefully not, but some
That's
do.
just
Sure,
a given.
sure.
Because the persons that you don't talk to say they're not performing, and you're sitting there talking to friends, which there's nothing wrong with that.
Sure.
Are you going to hold the same accountability level to the people that you've known and been friends with while you're working with, and the same accountability as the ones that you don't?
Sure.
And that's why they do that.
Oh yeah, of course.
And I'm not saying it's right. I'm just saying, when I had to take that, it kind of made me realize, like, oh, well, that kind of does make sense. Now, you don't have to be a jerk.
No, sure.
You can still be their friend.
Sure.
But you also have to lay that line and say, look, I got promoted.
Right.
I cannot play favoritism.
Sure.
I am not going to be allowed. So if you mess up, I'm going to hold you the same accountability as this person.
Well, and see, and that comes to pride of station, does it not? You have to have that understanding that just because you are over them doesn't make you more than them, right? And in the same token, irregardless of who's under you, they're all equal, should be all equal in that level below you, right? And that's kind of what you're getting at there. And yes, you're absolutely right. And it's hard to do because, again, we are, and our world is designed to get us to have that pride of station and to be the jerk instead of the person that can manage people properly and equally, right? And righteously, right? But it can be done, but it's hard, yes, very hard. Good points. Any other thoughts? And then I'll move to the next. All right. So, how do we get trapped by pride? What's the advent? Where does it come from? How does it happen, so to speak, right? What brings it on us? And pride, ultimately what we've been talking about, pride is an inordinate amount of self-appreciation. It's where you believe you are more than you truly are, right? And it comes basically to you. It's, as we said earlier, you're not born with it. It's something that happens, right, over life and experience, right? And you can see that because if you look at an infant or a real young child, they tend to not have the kind of pride that we're talking about, other than the one that we talked about where they think they know more than they do. That's usually teen years. But what I'm talking about is young kids. They tend to not have these kind of prideful thoughts that we do as an adult. But so how does it come? Many ways. Like the one example that Angie just gave, you may be told that this is how you need to be, and in order to accept that position, you accept the instruction to be prideful, right? So another way that it comes is by associating only with inferior people, right? If you surround yourself with people that are less than you purposely to make yourself feel good, that will lead to pride, right? You should try and surround yourself with people that are greater than you, right? That know more than you, that are better than you, that are whatever, superior to you in whatever way. And by doing that, what you'll do is, number one, you'll help keep you from falling into this trap of pride. But number two, you'll learn, you'll grow, you'll become better, simply because you're surrounding yourself with people that can enhance you, that can help you grow, right? It's kind of like what we were talking about with Joey's new boss. Irregardless of his age, he obviously is in that position for a purpose, right? For a reason. There was something on his resume that got him the job. And ultimately that means there's something that can be learned from him. And so when we surround ourselves with people that are in greater positions than us, better than us, that are more talented than us. It gives us an opportunity to learn and grow as a Christian. So it can be very easy to fall into that pride if all you do is make sure that you are top dog. And I know we know those people, right? You know those people. Those people that try and be the funny guy in the crowd, so to speak, right? The one that's always looking for attention, right? And they act like they are greater than everybody around them. Those kind of people will tend to try and surround themselves with people they believe are inferior to themselves. And it's in order to enhance their own pride. And unfortunately, it's bad. Yes?
For me, this pride versus humility, it really boils down to self versus letting yourself be submissive to what's best.
Yes.
You know, because pride, it's all about me. You know? And if you can't focus on things in a way that take you out of the picture, then pride can slip right in on you real easy, and you don't even realize.
Certainly.
Say something or do something that's self-centered. You know?
Right.
I read a long time ago, Bonhoeffer had wrote that like 80 or 90% of people act on self-interest.
Yes.
And that's what Paul talks about. He's talking about the war against his flesh.
Yes.
Your own self-interest trying to drive what you do or say or how you act. And that's a constant struggle.
Yes.
It is.
It's a daily thing.
That's why the devil uses it.
Yes.
He knows that.
Yes. Yes. We all, look, all of us enjoy things that make us feel good, right? And ultimately, that's kind of what you're getting at is we all like to make ourselves feel better or good or whatever, right? And so we tend to gravitate towards those things or those situations that bring us that good feeling, right? And unfortunately, it can lead to a situation, many times, prideful situations that lead to sin. Good point. Good point. Ultimately, another way that you can fall into pride is by ignoring the true standards of character, right? When we lose sight of God's eternal law, when we lose sight of our moral integrity, and judge ourselves only by the imperfect standards of the world, then we fall into pride there, right? Because look, it's what I said earlier. I'm not as bad as that guy, right? When you start thinking like that, then you fall into the sin of pride, because ultimately you are just as bad as that guy, whether you want to realize it or not. We're all equally wicked. We're all equally not worthy of God's love that He gives us, or the gifts that He gives us, right? And none of us are worthy, not one. The Bible says, right? So to believe that you are somehow in any way better than the other person is sin of pride and wrong. But the way you lead to there is ignoring your own faults, right? So to get to that point, you have to ignore your own faults. You have to forget what you did today, right? Because I can tell you right now, I'm sure several, if I thought about it hard, there are probably several sins I've already committed today. I don't know. I mean, I'm just saying that. But we all do, right? And we tend to ignore them rather than reflect on them. And because of that leads to, again, when you ignore the true character of like Jesus' character, then you tend to fall into this sin of pride. Now, another path to pride is by disregarding the majesty of God, by disregarding just how much awe you should have for God, right? The fear of God. We've talked about this several times, right? Where God sits in your life. Who am I to you, as Jesus asked, right? Who do you say I am? And if your answer to that is anything less than the most powerful thing in existence, then you're probably not giving God the righteous due that He has, right? And that can lead to pride, right? Ultimately, by you disregarding God in your life, many times that will lead to a lot of pride. And folly, right? Now, the evil of pride. We've been talking about the evil of pride. Ultimately, it tends to hurt others, right? It causes folly. It causes folly of you, right? And then guilt, ultimately. Because if you realize and learn what you've done wrong, it'll lead to guilt. Now, there's a story I was going to tell you about, the story of Cardinal Wolsey and his downfall, but we're running out of time. But I do want to hit on here, what is the antidote of pride? And that's humility, right? And ultimately, humility is being willing to accept that you are not anything better than anybody else, right? That you are equal to everyone around you. That you put others first in your life, and then you put God at the top of everything. And I know we've talked several times of what humility is, but ultimately, it's something that, again, you have to work at. It's not something that you are going to just naturally wake up every morning and be humble. You have to work at it, right? And some of the easiest ways to work at it is to seek out ways to humble yourself before others, right? Ask people that are in different spots. Hey, can I talk to you for 30 minutes, right? I'd like to learn from you. I'd like to know more about what you do, or I'd like to know your experience with something, right? That's humbling yourself before them. But it also will help you learn. It will teach you, and it's something that we all should be doing constantly. And ultimately, when you do humble yourself before people, what you'll find is they'll respect you more, and they'll tend to be more thoughtful of you, right? They'll tend to try and help you more. If you're not, if you're the guy that's always acting like you're better than everybody, I can tell you right now, you're going to be shunned ultimately. People are not going to gravitate towards you because why would they? And that's why humility is such an important thing for us as Christians. How can you ever draw people to the Lord if you're unwilling to even stand next to your fellow sinner and declare you're just as bad as he is? How can you show him that you were once like him unless you accept you were once like him? How can you lead him to the Lord unless you're humble? And that's ultimately why humility and humbleness is so important for us as Christians. Yes?
So, a couple of things, God values highly. The Bible describes humility as a virtue that God values highly as a foundation of holy living.
Right.
Freedom from pride and arrogance. A couple examples that I found in the Bible is James 4:6, Philippians 2:7 and 2:8 as well.
Yep.
Those are both, good examples.
Very good. They're actually on my next slide. Would you read my slides or something? I'm pretty sure both those are on my next slide. Or maybe it's the fourth one. Hang on. I've got several slides. So it's not really a 3-part, it's more like a 5-parter. But here. Well, maybe they are, maybe they're not. All right, good call. Those are good. I've got several. They may be in there. Absolutely. And look, it's a character trait of a Christian, right? You've got to, but it's something you got to work at. It's not something you can just gain automatically. Very good. Thank you. Any other thoughts?
Well, you're also stepping out of your comfortable zone too.
Sure. It's hard to
You're
do.
not used to doing that.
Right.
And that's where pride comes in. You got to just tell yourself, this isn't right. This is not what I'm supposed to follow. And you just got to do it.
Right. It can be very difficult.
Yeah, they didn't have to teach us how to be prideful. That came naturally.
Mm-hmm.
They had to teach you how to be humble.
Right.
James chapter 2, your story about the preacher sitting in the back,
Right.
dirty clothes. That's that chapter 2, the whole thing right there, how they treat you.
Right. Absolutely. And it's sad. It's sad that we live in a world where that happens, right? I don't think, unfortunately, it's just easy to fall into that trap too. So if you ever see somebody in that position, understand they're just like you. Reach out to them. Show them your Christian value of humility, and that you're willing to help them whoever they are. Because I can tell you right now, everybody deserves the love of God. Everybody deserves to know the gospel that you know. And how are you ever going to find the ability to share that with them unless you understand you're on their level? Whether the whole come down to their level, you're already there. You just need to accept you're there. Is the truth of it, right? We're all already down on that level. We're all equal, irregardless of what station, birth, money, any of that we have. The truth is you've got to convince yourself and understand that. Not that you've got to lower yourself. You're already low. according to the Bible, we're all equal under God's eyes. And so we have to learn that because God already knows it, right? Yeah, we're running out of time. We'll wrap things up this week, and we'll work on the next. I think we've covered pride pretty well. Again, it's something that you're going to daily have to battle, and always understand that humility leads to being able to witness to God, or witness for God, I should say. And pride leads to the opposite, the inability to witness for God. And as Jimmy so eloquently pointed out, all those prideful things, those types of pride, can also be a positive kind of pride when they are used to exalt the Lord, when they are used for His purposes rather than your own, rather than aggrandizing your own self. All right, who will say a prayer for us to end the class?
That way we have to write it all down.
Right? And of course, all this will be on the site by tomorrow. So, if you want it there as well. All right. Somebody say a prayer for me?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Father God, we just thank you for your word, and just thank you for your love for us. Thank you, Jesus, for your example of humility. You humbled yourself to become a man and die on the cross for our sins. We thank you for that. And it's help us to be mindful to be humble before you and others. Your word says that you resist the proud and give grace to the humble. It's help us to be an example of that for others to follow and to witness for you, Father. Pray for the service that if anyone there is lost, that today they would come to know you, Lord Jesus, as their Savior. Pray for Pastor Jim as we would speak through them, and it's in your words to say. And it's in your name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Awesome. Thank you, guys. God bless everybody. And don't forget, come up here if you don't mind helping me with the Family Life Center and sign up. Yeah. Just stopping the recording now. Let me get X. Oh, you pull out.
Oh, I didn't get the what you